Artie was just coming out of whatever he was coming off of, and he looked at me like, and I'll never forget that look. It was so chilling. It was like, if he could get out of that bed, he would strangle me. That's how I just, and he couldn't talk. He felt pathetic. I could see, just the pain in him. And it was a very heavy moment. And I just, I'd rather not think about it.
No.
It was.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masses Restaurants, 5 locations in St. Louis, stlmasses.com. Today, the man who created the channels, he did not create, but he was the vice president there at Howard Stern's channels on Sirius. Tim Sabean joins me. I mentioned to Matt Artie because that's what really got me into the show, was Artie being part of it. And I think we talked about it last time, but I'm just curious, like, how much you had to deal with him. Like, was it more Howard coming to you and saying deal with him? Because there was a lot of issues there in the last 3 or 4 years he was there. How often did you have to kind of personally go to him and say, listen, man, let's get this together. What can we do to help? How many times did that come up for you?
Every day. I mean, Howard and I would meet with him on occasion, but I had to deal with it. And because we were a family and so close, that we felt the bumps in the road, and I didn't understand what he was going through until, we got really into it. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was really heartbreaking to see one of your fellow comrades and, friend and a guy with such a big heart and soul as Artie had, to watch somebody to go through that. It's just terrifying. And I didn't understand it. I'm not a therapist, whatever, but I was a friend of his, and to see him to go through what he went through. And then when he stabbed himself after I cut him loose from the team, and it was horrifying. I still have shivers up and down my spine even thinking about it. But that's how heavy and how close it was, and what it meant. And the podcast that I was on with Artie that time, it was just so good to see him. It was the healthiest I've seen him in a long time. And it made me feel good that, hopefully he turned the corner, but, all you can do is pray. So, and hope for the best with guys like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to go on and on, but I have a question about just what was that day like where you did have to tell him? Like, how did that happen? Can you kind of take me through? I know he was on the show, and the next day, it was a Thursday, he wasn't. So it was clearly that day, right? Tell me, just give me how that happened, like just the details. Because it's interesting, I think, to everyone to hear, someone you've heard every day and made you laugh and you're hoping is good. Now he's not there.
I talked to him after the show, and I walked him out of the building, and I just, gave him a hug and asked him to get help. And he did go to rehab for, I think, 24 hours. And then he got out of rehab and he went home and stabbed himself 7 times. And I remember sitting next in the hospital bed with his mom and his sister and Robin, and Artie was just coming out of whatever he was coming off of, and he looked at me like, and I'll never forget that look. It was so chilling. It was like, if he could get out of that bed, he would strangle me. That's how I just, and he couldn't talk. He felt pathetic. I could see, just the pain in him. And it was a very heavy moment. And I just, I'd rather not think about it.
No. Okay, I'm not going to continue. Have you talked to him, though? Have you heard from him since the last time we talked? Is it?
No, I reach out to his manager every once in a while to see how he's doing, but he's kind of laying low.
I feel like there's 2 great eras. I mean, the Jackie era building up into this where he goes from one station, then he goes to Philly, then LA. So there's that era. And then there's the Artie era, I think, which would also be considered the Sirius era, which is my favorite. I loved Artie. Tell me a little bit about Artie. How hard was it to manage him? And are you kind of personally involved as he's kind of going down his descent? It seems like he's okay and he's making his, and everyone's like, oh, Artie's not here. He's got a cold. And it was kind of, tap dance around until we get to like 2009 where it's like, okay, what's going on? How is it to manage him? And are you in those like, Artie, what are you doing? How does that work?
Well, it was like going from the David Lee Roth era to Sammy Hagar, from Jackie to Artie. And Artie was a different kind of animal because everybody loved Artie very deeply. And he was just a good soul and would help people above and beyond that. I mean, I could go on forever and ever. He was just such a heartwarming guy, but he had demons. And one of the things, Howard and I would sit down with Artie on numerous occasions and talk to him about, rehab, or talk to him about maybe he should take some time off, or, this and that. Without, we couldn't accuse him of doing drugs. You can't do that. But, and I didn't know what was going on, but all I knew is every time we took a hiatus, Artie was getting arrested, or this was happening, that was happening. And it was nerve wracking. It was just, it was heavy. It was very, very heavy. And you get roped into the craziness of Artie. And it was just heartbreaking. And the time that I had to tell him that we were going, can you hear the lawnmowers in the back?
Oh, I can hear you mostly, so that's good.
Okay. I apologize for that. It's always,
And dogs.
So anyway,
this is the new world we live in.
Radio edit. Yeah. But it was heartbreaking because you would get emotionally involved in it. And when I had to tell Artie that we were, going to part company, it was on a Thursday, I think it was. And he went home and and he stabbed himself like 7 times. And it sends shivers down my spine now, but even to talk about it. And I'll never forget the day that Robin and we went to the hospital. We were sitting next to the bedside, and he's looking at me, and he was coming off of drugs and whatever else. And he was sitting there and, all whatever, looped up on whatever the doctors gave him. And he looked at me like, you motherfucker, and It never forget that look as long as I live. But we since talked about it and all that kind of thing. But it was just very hard, very emotional. And it was a very emotional experience from a business standpoint, from just a humanistic standpoint, dealing with Artie. It was heavy.
Does Howard finally say, Tim, we can't do this anymore? Or do you say, how does that decision come about?
We both did. We both looked at each other and said, enough is enough, because it was just draining. Instead of, focusing and pouring your efforts into being creative and to, advancing the business, we were spending time dealing with Artie issues. It was consuming a lot of time. So we made a decision, and it was a tough decision. It wasn't done haphazardly, but it was done out of love, pretty much, that for the love of the rest of the staff, because it was killing everybody.
But there was a lot of bits on the air, him falling asleep, and they're funny. Unfortunately, now that we know back revisionist, it's not funny. But there are so many. So how do you guys tap dance around? This seems weird, but it's funny. It's good for as Howard always said, it's good for the air. So right, it had to be that.
As we got to, I remember the day when we found that there was heroin. I was like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" And it was just, it was heavy. It was emotional. It was just, everybody dealt with it their own way. But Howard and I kind of sat down and just, what do we do? We're kind of at a loss. I can't fix it. We can make decisions that affect the business, but I can't fix Artie. I can't take away the pain. I can't take away, what he's going through. So it is what it is.
So we saw that you did this podcast back in January, and then he kind of just went off the face of the earth in April. Was that the first time you'd kind of gotten to really, because it sounded like he really wanted to apologize to you. And then I know people are just like, where is he? What's going on? Have you had a chance to talk to him or know what he's doing?
That was probably the third time that I saw him. I saw him, he was getting back on his feet. He really looked the best that I've ever seen him. He lost weight and everything. And so that was good. And he seemed to be, in good spirits and all that. And it was really a loving, touching moment that he literally wrapped his arms around me and apologized. And I'm like, dude, forget about it. We're all good. It's just, but I was there. I love Artie, and everybody loves Artie. It's just couldn't tolerate the drug bullshit and the inconsistencies, and And it was just a heartache, but it was so good to see him. The last time I did his podcast, we talked about a lot of cool things and got a lot of things kind of off our chests, and it was good. And I just pray that he's doing well and he's good, and he's getting the help he needs. So
you don't have a hard.
I just wish the best.
I was gonna say you don't have a hard line to him and going, "Come on, Artie, it's Tim." Come.
No. I reached out to his agent, to see how he was doing, and I didn't get a response. So I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but I just hope that he's getting the help that he needs.
Yeah, let's hope he reappears. So you create these networks, Howard 100, Howard 101. That seems like the hardest part would be, because he had, 3 channels to start when they announced it. It comes down to 2. Tell me about how hard it is to say, oh, my, what are we going to put on that other channel, right? I mean, that's where the creative comes in, and that's where Superfan Roundtable and Pharrell, and you had all these kind of, that was really where you get a chance to go, we can do whatever we want, right? And tell me some of those favorite shows that you got to do there.
Well, in building out the channels, we knew that we wanted a main channel for Howard that was Howard 24/7. The thinking was like when you hit the button on a Coke machine, you know what you're going to get. You know what it tastes like mentally. You know what what it looks like, and so forth. And 24/7, if you want Howard, you're going to get it on Howard 100. On Howard 101, we did the West Coast replay, so they would have it, as a morning show on the West Coast. And the rest of the day, Howard and I decided that why don't we build out a male-targeted network? Because, someday we thought that, Howard's going to retire, and then we would have all of this content developed that's in his likeness, that's, downstream from him, that we would package, and the Howard brand would continue to go on. And my thinking was that I wanted to develop these shows, for example, like Back Office Radio or Geek Time or a lot of this other stuff that we did, which was a lot of fun doing, that we'd see what stuck and what didn't stick. Because one of the beauties about satellite radio is there aren't ratings. So you can try things and you don't have to worry about whether it's going to be Nielsen rated and whether advertisers will buy it or this or that. We tried to make it in the likeness of Howard, but it was really a great exercise for me and developing, the creative part of programming, because we could try things, and if they worked, they worked. If they didn't, they didn't. But we developed a lot of good things that came out of it, like the Howard 100 News, like the things. Back Office Radio was a great show that I loved that we did, and with the comedians, with Andrew Dice Clay, and with some of the bands we brought in and developed. And it was just it was like a playground for programming, and Howard was willing to try chances. One of the great things that we did was I worked with Sam Simon in developing this half-hour special called The Bitter Half, and it was a show about the wives and girlfriends of the show wanted to keep Howard alive. Beth wanted to kill Howard for his money, and it was hysterical. We put it on the air, and the response was incredible. And I wanted to take it and do it as an off-Broadway show, but Howard got, I think, a little nervous about the premise of it, but understandably. But it was we just did a lot of fun things and had a lot of great experiments working for us. So
yeah, and I mentioned I was a fan all the way up, but unfortunately, once Artie left, it was sort of over for me. I don't know, the show just didn't sound the same. And then we move into the 2013, and we've seen on YouTube there's the summit meeting. What was that like as he's sort of changing, and as Gary would always say, evolving, quote, what was the summit meeting like for you when you see Howard on that stage saying, I want A-listers? Were you aware that this was what he was coming with?
It was game over. It was game over for me. We were on an attack that was so powerful and so successful. If there was no, when you do a change like that, you got to show value add. You got to show to the audience why you're doing what you're doing. It's not that it was wrong what he did. It was in the way that it happened that was wrong. So, but it is what it is. It's his bat, his ball, his game. So he can do whatever he'd like to do. So God bless him.
Yeah, and you said it was the beginning of the end. The end happened so weirdly. I know you've told this story before, but your father passes away, right? And you've decided this is kind of be my time where I want to maybe take a leave of absence. Tell me that story, because it does really when I heard this, I'm like, man, that's a terrible way to end it for a guy who's been with him so long.
Yeah, it was personal, and I says, okay, whatever, and I just let it go. But it was a moment. It was a lot of things. Both my parents were dying at the same time. That was very hard. I never even knew how to even deal with that, and it was tough. Because I literally dedicated my life to Howard. I moved from Philadelphia to New York on my own dime. I believed in him and what we were doing so deeply, and it was such a part of my life. And when that happened, it was tough. But life goes on. You pick up and you move on.
Yeah, so you did move on. But how long does it take to get over not being there? Because at this point, essentially, he just says you wanted to take a leave of absence, and he goes, "I'm just going to let you go." Which, did he ever explain what that was about? But then, secondly,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't deserve discussion. But the thing is, you pick up, you move on. It's not how many times you get knocked down; it's how many times you get up. And it literally, like when the Howard TV crew was cut loose. Doug called me up and said, "Hey, I just got fired." I'm like, I said, "Dude, it's the best thing that'll ever happen to you." And he goes, "Why? What do you mean?" I said, "It'll take you 2 months to recoup, to get your soul back, your heart back, your psyche back, your sleep patterns back, and all that kind of stuff, because you live it every single day. You're brainwashed. You're living in a bubble. And when you get out of it and you see that there's life outside of it, you go, oh my God. And it really is like a rebirth. And so it's what you go through, and life has its ups and downs. And that was one of the greatest ups of my career. And I'll be forever grateful. But, you move on, you rebuild yourself, and it takes time. So it's all good.
What reinvigorates you? I did TV broadcasting for 15 years, and I remember after I left it, it was like this cloud. People said to me, "Your face looks like you don't have that scrunched up face. You look more alive and awake." And I did not know this was happening, but I knew that at the end I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I understand.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because we would all, if you weren't in bed by 8:00 at night or by 9:00 at the latest, and falling asleep because you had to get up at 4 a.m, 3:30, 4 a.m, and it's grueling. And you do that every single day, it's everybody's sleep deprived, everybody's stressed out, and you don't realize how that affects you, and it does affect you. And then when you start to get a normal night's sleep and you don't have that day-to-day pressure on you, all of a sudden you start breathing better, you start feeling better, and it's different. So
trust me, I don't go to a psychiatrist, but I have these conversations with people, and I'm like, what is a job? And is the job supposed to be you, or are you just supposed to go work and help provide for your family? Because I loved that job. I loved working on baseball and Cardinals TV, but I also love having weekends off and swimming and not having to worry about going to, and it's so weird how that works. And I guess once you get older, hey, look, I did that. That was fun. I had a great time. I have great stories, but now I'm doing this and I love this and it makes me feel better, right? And I guess that's where we're at with you.
Yeah, I loved every moment of it. It was my life for 26 years. And I met some of the greatest people in my career. I experienced some of the greatest things in my career. I developed a skill set unique from 99.9% of the other people that do this in their life. And I was very blessed to have that opportunity, and I'm forever grateful. So it is what it is, and you go on to the next thing, and I'm having fun at what I'm doing now. So it's and this is also very, very rewarding. This is, what I'm doing now is it's a win-win for advertisers. It's a win-win for the fans. It's a win-win for us. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's a startup. I mean, is this considered a startup? So, I mean, again, you get to start from the ground up. But do you miss the radio part? I mean, or is that, hey, that was this, now this is this?
I'm still involved in it to a certain degree, on a peripheral way, and being, a supplier and a service to radio and to entertainment. So I'm still in it very much, but just in a different capacity, reinventing yourself. But in this day and age, radio is not what it is. I still own a radio company of 15 radio stations. So I'm involved in it, knee deep. I'd rather be in the software, the ad tech business, the gaming, space of it. I find this much more interesting, much more challenging, much more rewarding. And this company, React.net, that I'm involved in, is going to be a multi-billion-dollar company in a couple of years. This thing is going to take off and just like a rocket. It's so exciting to be a part of this. And when I saw this, that there was three things in my life that really hit me like lightning. It was my dad took me to see the Beatles when I was a kid. And we went backstage and met him and all that stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is the biggest thing since sliced bread. And then meeting Howard Stern at WNBC, that was like a moment when I met him and I saw it and I understood what it was about. I thought, I want to be a part of this. And I see what this can be. I kind of understood what it was about because I was working in Chicago with Steve and Gary, that were guys that we were starting to syndicate. We were putting them in Detroit and working with them and starting to grow that network. Then I went to, moved on to other situations. But then I linked up with Howard, and I understood that from day one, and I was ready to go. I was the guy. I was the right guy at the right time to do that. So it just felt good. So, and then the third thing was getting hit by lightning was meeting Frank Maggio and learning about React and seeing what this is all about. And so this is going to be a big deal. You're going to see a lot from us in the coming year, in 2020, throughout this year and next year, big time.
I thought the third thing was going to be meeting me and being able to talk on this podcast. So I maybe fourth.
It was a close third, but
I always like to wrap up and just say, what do you have a story that I missed? Did you have one thing you wanted? We talked about React. Is there a story that just kind of you think about from your time in those days? Is there one thing that you go, well, that was fun, I remember that, and that's a story I like telling? Or did we get to all of them?
It's just the people that I met and worked with along the way. Very, very special, and it's all about the people, and that was the most memorable part of it.
Yeah, well, it was a fun group, and again, Tim, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody watching here on YouTube and listening on the podcast apps. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masses Restaurants, 5 locations, stlmasses.com. We'll talk to you next time.